Always true.
Across today's wars, one pattern is constant. Women and girls are being targeted, raped, brutalized, disappeared with almost total impunity. In Sudan, the reports are harrowing: gang rapes, mutilations, executions. In Gaza and Syria, schools and shelters deliberately struck. In Afghanistan, girls locked out of classrooms, women erased from public life. The violence is widespread. The protection is not. And 3 decades after the world pledged to build societies rooted in dignity and equality, the reality is moving in the opposite direction. Qatar recently hosted the second World Summit for Social Development. At the top of the agenda, a warning: ending violence against women and girls is the front line of peace and sustainable progress, not a secondary concern. At the summit, we caught up with a woman using her voice at the highest levels to defend the rights of others. But with conflicts escalating, funding shrinking, and political will faltering, hard questions remain about the world's ability and the UN's capacity to protect those most at risk. The Deputy Secretary-General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed, talks to Al Jazeera. Your Excellency Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary-General of the United Nations, thank you very much for joining us. Violence against women and girls in Sudan has reached alarming rates. There are right now widespread reports of women being gang raped, of women being mutilated and displaced with total impunity in the conflict between the army and the paramilitary RSF. How is the United Nations responding to this, not just with words of condemnation, but with concrete action, protection, and justice for these women?
Well, first, these atrocities, now finally visible, have been happening for many months. And finally, to get the attention to this also brings the ability for the UN to reach them. The first and foremost has been, it has been difficult to actually reach these women, reach the children, and to be able to protect and to give them the care and the humanitarian aid that they need. So beyond the words of condemnation, beyond trying to get that ceasefire, beyond trying to call, at least bear witness and call for accountability, it is about trying to get to all those women and children and to give them the care that they need. That has happened much more than we've had in the last few weeks. We are getting access and we are trying to get to them. Our humanitarian coordinator from OCHA will be there, and so do the rest of our team on the ground.
The atrocities unfolding in Sudan, Amina Mohammed, echo the horrors of Darfur 20 years ago. Why do you think the world has become so numb to this suffering? Is Sudan a forgotten conflict, or is it one we are choosing to ignore?
I think Sudan is one too many. And everyone turns their gaze to different conflicts that we are having around the world. And in every single one of them, women bear the brunt of these atrocities, whether we are seeing Gaza, we're seeing South Sudan over the years, and now, of course, and in the Sahel. I mean, we do not hear of the atrocities in the Sahel. Sudan, we are fortunate today that there is visibility on that, and there are many efforts being made to bring this to a halt. I think that, you know, we've not been able to hold people to account in the past, that there are implications for when these atrocities happen.
Visibility is there, but the accountability is not happening. You know, as the highest ranking woman at the United Nations, how do you feel when you hear these reports of women being mutilated? Do you feel sometimes like we're failing, that you failed the women of Sudan or the women of Gaza?
I think, you know, first of all, it's an outrage. I mean, you get through the frustrations, but you also have to admit the international community of which you are a part has lost its moral compass, that we don't call out the atrocities against women and those people that are responsible for them. The warring parties in Sudan have no right to do this to the women of their communities, of their society, and yet their fixation is on winning a war and not making peace. And I hope that we will be able to bear witness and to hold them to account and bring to account all those who committed these atrocities.
But as you know, sexual violence is one of the most challenging international crimes to document and to pursue in court. So how can the UN, for example, improve evidence gathering and legal accountability in these places like Sudan to ensure that there is indeed justice and that this doesn't happen again?
We must get the voices. I mean, we must hear the voices of the women, of those that have borne the brunt of these atrocities, and we must bring them forward and we must hold people to account. International law must remain at the fulcrum of what we do, and if it doesn't, then we all fall apart. And I think that, when we look at what is happening today, we are reminded of the urgency, that we have the tools. What we need is the political will to make sure that we hold to account everyone that is responsible, to take this up in the highest places.
Right.
And of course, in Sudan, we have to look at our institutions in Africa and our African leaders to hold colleagues to account. This cannot be, continue to be happening. The United Nations, the same thing. The Security Council should be with women, peace and security, as the resolution of 25 years should also hold to account leaders who commit these atrocities.
Right, they are resolutions. The resolutions exist. The fact-finding missions are there, the UN investigations, and yet the violence persists. So there is something that's not working, right?
Yes, absolutely.
How then do we make it different? How do we make it work?
Well, we continue to push. We continue to bring this to the fore. People need to build the momentum and the charge and demand from those that are in the communities to those that are in the international community. We at the United Nations, right. Everyone needs to be involved. It's a collective responsibility not to think it's okay to rape a woman in war. In fact, the war in its first place, we need to look at the root causes so that we find the prevention of these conflicts. But while we have these conflicts on, there should be untouchables, and untouchable should be a woman and child in war, whatever the crime.
Right. Let's talk about the Spotlight Initiative, the UN Spotlight Initiative, which its mission is to end violence against women and empower women. How does meaningful success look like for this initiative, for Spotlight, if we're still hearing about terror against women at this scale in Sudan, in Gaza, previously in Syria, Afghanistan? How do you measure the success of Spotlight Initiative?
I think in an outcome where communities and societies now know peace and women don't live in fear, in communities where you have been held to account, that the legal system has been able to hold you to account, and there has been implications for that because that will prevent the next person. But also to see women's lives that were torn apart rebuilt. That there are laws to protect them, there are livelihoods that they can engage with, there are families that come back together, that the torn fabric of that society is mended, and that we look to the early warning signs of anything in the future that would happen. We have to learn from these tragic experiences to prevent the future.
To make sure that these women are not merely surviving in their communities, but are leading these communities. How do we do that?
Survival from these atrocities is how we invest in their lives in the future. And so the monies that need to go to rebuild their lives, to rebuild their families, and then to put them in the positions where they are leading on mediation, where they are leading on negotiating the future of peace in their countries. This is important.
All right. The initiative was designed to help shift mindsets and systems, the Spotlight initiatives. What do you see as the toughest barriers to implement that? You've faced in scaling this initiative in active conflict zones, once again, like Sudan. Is changing the mindset really something that is feasible, that is achievable?
I think it is. There are many communities that women do not live in fear. So it is not natural for that to happen. And I think we have to go back to those root causes. And there are many exacerbators of this, from communities that live in such dire poverty that exacerbate the situation in a family where violence then occurs, to finding the way to empower that family so that you can nurture it and not be victims inside a toxic atmosphere. There are laws that we can put in place now that were not in place before. And I've often said it's not about so much about the safe houses, which we need, but it is about the perpetrator being taken out of a home and a woman protected with her family in that home. So the way we approach the legal system, and we protect women, and then, you know, it is about our traditions. It is about where a woman is in society, what a man brings up a child, a boy child, to think he has an entitlement to when it comes to violence against women and where their position is in society. There are many norms that, you know, we still have to work on in many of our societies. But let's not forget that there are exacerbating factors to that environment.
Right. And so when the UN says ending gender-based violence is foundational to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, the question, I mean, then you wonder why then, if that's the case, why are governments still treating it as a private or a social or a cultural issue rather than a development, a core development issue? Why is that not happening? And how do you, as, you know, the person who's championed these SDGs, how do you change that?
I think you have to bring, you know, to the fore that every human in that society has a right to live in peace, and the fact that you have half of your citizenry living in fear, and that is not addressed, you have to bring to the fore in policies, in the outcomes of what success looks like for leadership. And often that doesn't happen because there are so many competing demands that, as always, we fall off the edge with this. It's the same with education. You need education as the cornerstone of development, and what happens there, it falls off when there are competing demands for government to invest in its future.
Yeah, and speaking of education, it brings me smoothly into what I wanted to ask you next. You've said that in crises, education is often the first casualty and the last to recover. In the Gaza Strip today, you have schools that have been destroyed, deliberately targeted. What does a country do, or peoples do, when an entire generation is missing out on education? And how do we rebuild today, not just the classrooms, but also hope? Because a lot of these children have lost hope.
Well, Gaza is a tragedy. We are grateful that there is a ceasefire. It gives us an opportunity to try to look at what building back Gaza, Palestine, and the two-state solution means for children. Yes, the lost generation.
Right.
What can we do about that? Today we have to go back in. It's not just about the bricks, it's about the mortar. How do we bring back those societies? How do we leapfrog? We have to make sure that technology is available to them as much as anyone else is. We have to look at who is in those classrooms, what kind of healing has to happen in communities to build back that social fabric, parents, children without families. I mean, it's very complex,
right.
And that has to start now.
Yeah.
And I hope that we can see both the UN and its partners going back in again as we build those classrooms, is to give great thought as to what it is that we are building back and how.
And precisely on that, I mean, on the question of how do we build back Gaza and who is involved in the building back of Gaza, that is a highly contentious issue right now.
It's very contentious, and I think we have to push to make sure that the people of Gaza are front and center to building back their homes, their life, their social fabric, their futures, the hope that one needs to draw from this. I am always amazed at the strength of the Palestinian person, child or woman, the resilience. And I believe that their faith has had a lot to play with it, but so their sense of community. And I think that when we are looking forth to how we shape the future of Gaza, of Palestine, it has to be done with the Palestinian people at the forefront, co-creating that future. They have to imagine it. They've hung on to it for so long. And if anything is to come out of this incredible tragedy, it is that they get a chance to rebuild. They get a chance to light that flame of hope.
Deputy Secretary-General, you visited Afghanistan in early 2023, and since then restrictions on women and girls have only intensified. Girls are banned from school, from secondary school, women from work, and what some now actually describe as gender apartheid is happening in Afghanistan. What can the international community and the United Nations do realistically when the Taliban government, the government in place, simply doesn't seem to care about the global outrage anymore?
I think that we continue to engage with them. I mean, my visit to Afghanistan was about engaging with the impossible. And many things, I believe, came from that in the re-engagement with them on many issues. Sadly, we went a few steps forward and now we've gone a few steps back. We continue to try to push back against that, hold on to the principles. This has happened also to our staff, our women staff in the UN, and we hold firmly to ensuring that they're back in their workplace before we can engage again.
But the engagement hasn't worked.
The
with the Taliban government.
Engagement worked. I mean, we saw more women in employment. We did see that they were able to access education. This happened in many of the provinces, but now we've seen a rollback. And I think that by not engaging, that rollback will continue to put visibility on this, to push with the allies that are able to go in to Afghanistan and to continue to work with the Taliban. It's important. We continue our engagement. The UN will stay and continue to deliver as best it can. And education is at the core of this. Women's rights, girls' rights to an education is critical. So we will continue to fight for that.
And so what do you say to this generation of young Afghan girls today who still have, these closed doors, who still can't go to secondary school and who are frankly losing hope in the international community and what it can do?
Well, we say don't lose hope, and we will continue to fight. We will continue to have visibility. We'll continue to push on those that have any influence over bringing the Taliban around to the fact that it is not an Islamic injunction that says a girl cannot go to school. This is anti-Islam. We have a right to education. We have a right, many rights, to aspire and to be part of that nation as equal citizens. And that, I think, is what we have to continue to push.
Now, you've argued that gender equality has to be culturally grounded and not imposed. So how do you strike that balance between respecting culture, local traditions, religion even, and defending women's fundamental rights?
That you don't practice your religion in the right way doesn't make the religion wrong. I think you have to continue to educate people about their religion. I've often said that in many cases the Taliban are ignorant of Islam, and so perhaps we need to enlighten them in order for women's rights to become a reality. The traditions, there are many good traditions, but there are also traditions that have outgrown their time, and we have to be in there with the communities and with the women. I mean, Afghan women once said to me, "Don't need your voice, DSG, what we need is for you to amplify ours." So we need to be listening to them, the demands and the solutions they think we can bring to this, what we should push for in allowing them access in their communities. And their communities are very different from Kabul to Kandahar. And I think we do need to meet them where they are and try to bring them back to where they were. And this is it is a huge dilemma for many girls who don't see a future tomorrow or even today. And we just have to continue fighting for that and pushing for it and making sure that the Taliban are brought to book.
Just to broaden this out a little bit, when we look at global funding for gender equality today, it's gone down. It is plummeting. And even as the rhetoric is growing louder. American policy right now challenges gender equality matters. President Donald Trump has halted funding to UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, the key agency which is advancing family planning worldwide. How do you continue to work? How do these agencies continue to work when the world's most powerful nation is pulling back support?
Well, I think what you do is broaden the base. The United States are not the only donors. And yes, we've taken a hit because we have lost critical and important funding, but we've also gained back some of that funding when we've been able to engage with the US and to explain what this means. This is beyond the word gender. This is about women. This is about girls. This is about the effect of patriarchal societies and men and women. And often when that's broken down and explained and you see the programs and projects behind them, we see a return to supporting that. We've seen it in the UN AIDS program. We've also seen it in other programs on the humanitarian front where they see women and girls affected.
But is President Trump's rollback on women's rights, not just internationally, but also domestically, as we've seen in the US, is that a danger to global gender equality? Do you see that as
I think that it is unfortunate, and it's an unfortunate predicament that we find ourselves in, but I don't think it's a danger. I think what we have seen is that in many of the discourse with our countries, that they have pushed back. They have said that this is important, and while the resources may not be here today, and it'll take longer to get to gender equality, no one is stepping back.
And it's not just the US. I mean, across many countries, we're seeing this deliberate erosion of women's autonomy, often led by powerful male leaders, it has to be said. So how can multilateral institutions, governments, how can you push back effectively against this global anti-rights movement that we're seeing emerge in a number of countries, in the global north especially?
I think you have to continue to build our own coalitions. And there are many, of women, of men, of boys. And I think that, you know, across the world, we have to push for more women in leadership position. It's not just as leading a country, but leading in decision-making spaces, in a cabinet, in the private sector, opening up those spaces. So in all of this pushback, find those islands of success and broaden them. And tell the story, because I think a lot comes out of the story of why it's not working. And what is not right about gender equality, but we have to show where the glass is some full.
Right. Let me come back to financing, development financing specifically. I mean, the UN often depends on the same donor states that are major geopolitical actors in crises, in these crises that we talk about. How does that dependence compromise your ability at the United Nations to act independently when moral clarity requires political courage?
There's a lot of political courage missing, and it's a world full of male leadership, and we need more women's leadership to push back on that. The multilateral system, at the core of it, is the United Nations. It serves people first. It's not the place where leaders should be taking away resources. Yes, we agree that every institution is not perfect, and we should always continuously be making it as relevant and effective as possible, but it shouldn't be to the detriment of people. And those resources belong to taxpayers, and I think there ought to be much more of a conversation with the taxpayers to where their money goes and what happens to it.
And many of the innovative approaches right now to women's empowerment are coming from the global south. What does that genuine south-to-south cooperation look like, and how can the UN amplify that and use these models to reshape the global agenda? The South-South cooperation we're seeing on issues like gender equality, women's empowerment. How do we amplify this?
Well, making space and creating, spaces for South-South cooperation. There's quite a bit of funding that is going there now, and we're seeing young people, intergenerational dialogues happening across regions, from Africa to Asia, the African Caribbean engagements that are happening on climate. So there are many that our job is to create that space and to convene. We've convened the Global African Business Initiative. It didn't stay in Africa. There are many that are interested from the Middle East and in Asia in joining that with young people on businesses, in sharing some of the success that they've had with education, with health responses. So I think we need to encourage that space, and it is happening anyway. Organically, it is happening. We're finding more and more meetings that are happening across the South that have not as happened as frequently in the past. Countries are better able to understand one another. In the South, there's a lot more trust, we see. And I think that is actually creating a more enabling environment.
Yeah. You are helping steer the United Nations Deputy Secretary-General through one of its most turbulent times, really. What keeps you personally motivated today? And what convinces you that genuine change is still possible by 2030?
Well, I mean, every day we wake up, there's a job to do. And I don't know that we can turn around and say to anyone, we've given up. I mean, there are millions of people out there who count on maybe tomorrow when we gather some leaders, something will happen as it did in Haiti the other day that everyone had almost given up on. And we now have a force in there, and perhaps there will be peace in Haiti finally. So it's for me, it is always, there is a possibility that the impossible will become possible, as Nelson Mandela said. And that's what I live for, is that means people. and people matter, and particularly the most vulnerable of our populations. So wake up, put visibility on it, keep shouting for it. Where you can close the reality, which is pretty miserable with the aspirations of what we do, every day, a little inch by inch. Some days we go out, some days we go in, but you can't give up.
Right.
And that's not something that's in my DNA.
What keeps you awake right now at night?
I think what keeps me awake is the failures.
Which one in particular? Which one?
What's my heaviest?
What is your heaviest one? What are you the most disappointed in right now?
I mean, if I was to put, let me have three.
Okay.
My first is Gaza. I think we lost our moral compass in the international community on Gaza, and we could have done something about it. Yes, we have a ceasefire today. I hope it holds, but I don't know what to say to a Palestinian whenever I meet them. And I've met some here, and that's my worst. My second is Sudan. While we were watching and listening and visibly doing nothing about Gaza, behind that veil, atrocities were happening. And even as we went there to try to talk to the leadership, it was to no avail. Because women have suffered. I mean, the incalculable suffering of seeing Sudanese women coming across a border that have been raped in every one of the 11 checkpoints they've had, and they come across it with what I witnessed, a baby on a mother's back, but already gone. So those things are difficult. And then that we turn the other way on the crisis in the Sahel. We will hear about so many more other atrocities in the Sahel when we decide to take the camera that way. So those are the things that they're unforgivable, and they are weighty because you are in a position where the world thinks that we could have done more. You do the best you can.
You say you don't know what to say to a Palestinian woman today in Gaza. If there was one sitting right here in front of you right now, what would you say to her? To that mother from Gaza, to that young girl from Gaza?
There is tomorrow, and there will be accountability. We have borne witness to that, and we hope that you can forgive us, and that we, in the work that we do going forward, we can have that two-state solution, that you may have a home, that you may know freedom, that you may know a life that we all have, that we take for granted.
Amina Mohammed, you have devoted your career to multilateralism. Your mandate ends in 2026. When you think about your legacy, what matters most to you today? Is it the institutions that you helped build, or perhaps the mindsets that you've helped change?
I think the mindsets that we helped to change by, in the United Nations, having half of our leadership women today, both
but
in
still
the
no
field.
Secretary-General.
Almost.
When?
We're almost. In 2026, at the end of 2026, 27, we will have a woman by the grace of God.
Are you in the running?
No, I'm going to be the campaign manager. I'm looking forward to going home. I hope that I left my office better than I met it. I hope that we inspired many women and girls to know that it is possible. And as I stood on the shoulders of many women, I hope some will stand on ours.
Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary-General of the United Nations, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you, Pauline.